Hey guys, Dave coming to you from the Hobo Dojo. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce this podcast. This is my conversation with my friend Tamra Dawn Hyde, who I met in my travels in 2017, and we've been friends since. She's one of the most multifaceted and complex and entertaining and fun human beings that I've ever met. There's a lot to this woman. She used to be a sort of a fashionista where she had rooms devoted to clothes and shoes and cared a lot about her physical appearance, very much into style and fashion. And now she lives in a school bus and doesn't give a rat's ass about most of that stuff. But she has a lot of great ideas and insights and just what I would call wisdom. So I hope you'll enjoy the ride. So this is the first part of this. And there will be two more parts coming up. I think this first one goes about 40 minutes and sort of tells the journey story a little bit. And the rest, we just get into human motivations and things we've observed and lots of insights and ideas about life and what makes everybody tick. So that'll be the second two parts of it that you'll be seeing Monday morning and Tuesday morning, unless I get hung up with something. I'll try to get those out. So have a nice cup of coffee. Enjoy this talk as much as we did. And do the same thing tomorrow morning and the next morning after that. All right. Thank you. Hey, everybody. I want you to meet a friend of mine. This is Tamra Hyde. Do you go by Tamra Dawn Hyde, or is that just my name for you?
I go by Tamra Dawn Hyde, Tamra Hyde, Tam.
Ramblin' Tam.
Ramblin' Tam, whatever. Not never Tammy. That's the only thing.
Or Tamara.
It's not Tamara or Tamara either.
Don't you hate that? I learned that quick.
Yeah.
I learned that quick. So Tamra lives in a school bus and is part of this sort of nomadic lifestyle. How did that happen, Tamra, that you found yourself living in a school bus?
Well, it was something that for a few years I had kind of fantasized about, but I think like a lot of people, it's like, oh, that seems like it'd be so cool, so fun, but then it's like, oh, but it it's so different than where I am now that it feels kind of daunting and intimidating, So I think I was just kind of like, oh, that would be neat, but like, who do I think I am to do something so, cool. And so I kind of accidentally fell into it. Actually, I had a job in an office for a year, which I already knew that I was not cut out for. And so to get that out of my system and to kind of do the opposite, I did my last big purge because at one point I had over 200 pairs of shoes. Like I paid extra rent to have rooms to store my clothes. I was shopping like 1 to 3 times a week, and I'd been moving towards minimalism for the better part of a decade and by baby steps. And I was at the point where I was like, I'm ready to do the last big purge. And so just got rid of a ton of stuff, packed up my little Kia Rio, a compact car. And I was like, I'm just going to go road trip for like 3 months, just to like be wild and free again. And I just kept extending my travel plans. Oh, but I haven't seen this yet. Oh, I have to go do that. Oh, I have to visit these people. And then at some point I was like, who am I kidding? This actually works as a lifestyle. I don't want to work full time and pay rent. And I've discovered that I don't have to. So I just continued living in a compact car for 2 years, which if I had set out to be like, I'm going to do van life or I'm going to be nomadic, wouldn't have done it in a Kia Rio, but it was accidental and it worked. Honestly, I was living in abundance. I mean, it's a trade. Obviously, I didn't have, I had to go out of my way to get a hot shower, and I couldn't store fresh food, in a refrigerator, and things like that. But it was a good trade. But at the end of 2 years, I was ready for a home I could stand up in.
And somewhere along the line, you had met up with Jamie and other people living this nomadic lifestyle, and you understood that there were people and a sort of supportive group out there.
Yeah, I think it was 2015 at the first van build party when I connected with Jamie. And that was when I first connected with community. And I was traveling with my friend Cammie, who
Cammie,
who
sure.
was living in a van. But otherwise we weren't really connected to the larger, van life community until I went to Jamie's first van build party. And that really changed my life. Meeting Jamie and going to that event changed my life because I went up to him and I said, hey, I love what you're doing because this is a community that's just based on generosity. And I was so moved by it. I said, I love what you're doing and I want to make a contribution, but I have no skills. And he handed me his camera and said, go do interviews. And so I went around and just asked people about, like, how did you come to this lifestyle? Let's do a little tour of your rig. And I guess it turns out I have a knack. So next time he saw me, he's like, my viewers love you. Could I get more footage of you at some point? And I'm like, you bet. And meanwhile, 2017, January, for New Year's, I decided I want a home I could stand up in, because I've been in a car for 2 years. And so then a little while later, Jamie approaches me and says he has this idea to do one van build start to finish, and kind of like have it be something that people can follow, maybe use as a reference of like the steps involved in that process. And he asked me if I'd be the recipient, which blew my mind, and it still does. And so Jamie and his community gave me my home, which is pretty remarkable.
Which is, for those listening, it is picture the small school buses that you see running around town. Tamra has, I believe, what's known as a 5-window bus, which means down one side there's 5 windows. So those would correspond with being 5 seats on each side, right? And so it's not one of the bigger ones, and it's certainly not, the kind of bus that is 40 feet long. But it's fairly roomy in there, and you like the way it's laid out. Maybe we'll have it. You can send me a picture, and before I publish this, I can throw a picture of it up. So we'll see if we can make that happen.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'm not in it right now. It's actually 4 hours south of me at the moment. But I wish. And yeah, I'll send you a picture. Dave, I'm sorry, was that noise picking up?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, I don't know what that was. It was perfectly quiet in here until a minute ago.
Okay, well, we're not worrying about that.
Okay.
It's just so you're away from your bus at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I felt the same. I felt the same way when I first hooked up with all of you people, and of course, I had only seen you on Jamie's channel, and that was where I think it was the video where they showed you the van that they had built for you. And I thought, well, this is a really entertaining person. And I was already drawn to Jamie because he just struck me as this like perfect alpha male character. But the tribe was, as you say, all about generosity. But he was still somehow making that a charismatic thing, at a time when we see all the tribes seem to be organized around grievances and around disliking each other. And it was a tribe that was organized around almost exactly the opposite thing.
Good vibes. Yeah. And we need it. We need it desperately. And he's really good at cultivating those good vibes. And he's really good at like showing a contrast of what we see often in media, and modeling a higher way for people to connect and interact with each other. And
that noise is happening again.
And it's more intense now. I'm so sorry.
What is it?
I don't know what that is. Should I go check it out?
Yeah, if you would, why don't I just pause this for a second? Okay. You go check that out. Okay, sorry, we just had to stop the thing for a minute, though. That there was this crazy noise going on, and it had something to do with the mailman, because right now Tamra has recently gotten married. I'm sure you don't mind me saying that.
No.
And she is, as she calls it, currently in his compartment.
Yeah. So we kind of are going, it's interesting because this is our first marriage, both of us, and we're both very well established in our lives. And so it's still kind of his place and my place. So we kind of go back and forth between his compartment in the city and then my bus in the desert. So.
Well, you've never seen my compartment. I'm in my compartment right now. This is the famed Hobo Dojo. And this is where I live. And
nice.
So
it's cozy.
I had already been attracted to this sort of tiny house movement, and the less is more. And I was trying to break down my life and get it. I wanted to live cheaper. I wanted to work less often, be less desperate every time the rent came around, less stressed, and just cut everything back down. And as you were saying, you had an awful lot of stuff to go through. I did too. Unfortunately, a good amount of my stuff is still out in the yard under blue tarps because I have no garage here. How much stuff did you have to get rid of when you decided to live more simply?
Well, again, it was a gradual process, and it felt like failure, over the course of like 8+ years of just like, because I had this vision, that came, really everything changed for me when I had this immersive experience in the wilderness, like way out in the back country, my first time for 11 days straight, like with just what I could carry in my back in literally a bundle that I strapped to my back, not even a commercial backpack. So that was the awakening for me of like, I'm a sick animal. Like animals, that hoard a bunch of stuff that they don't even use, that's not healthy. And so I had this vision of like how I wanted to be a healthier way, more simple, closer to nature, closer to my own nature as a human animal. But I also had this addiction and this compulsion, which we're all programmed to have, and those habits that I'd been, cultivating. And so over the course of 8 years, I was gradually like baby steps trying to consume less, trying to acquire and accumulate less, and trying to let go more. But it was a really long process that was a lot of like crying and failing and praying and trying, and until finally like
you really felt it as if it was withdrawal from an addiction in a sense.
Oh, it was absolutely addiction. It was absolutely addiction. And when I was stressed, even stressed about money, I would go shopping. If I was sad, I would go shopping.
I had a thought the other day that I thought that I wanted to run by you. The idea was that we are, as you say, we are these animals, and of course, survival, if we're living out in the wild, survival depends on us accumulating resources. And so if you see an extra amount of resources laying around, of course you hoard it because you're always looking. So I'm wondering if there's some way, if we start accumulating more than we need so that it starts looking like hoarding to our organism. I wonder if there's some way that tells our brain over and over again that we're in desperate straits. Why would we be trying so hard to get things every single day unless we were really in danger? I wonder if we're leaning into some kind of inborn stress by having more than we need. Doesn't that, in a sense, tell our brains that we're starving?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's like the thing, like there's nothing wrong with our design. It just doesn't fit the world that we live in. Like you said, we're designed to get stuff because we might need it later. We're designed to seek comfort and convenience. We were just never intended to have so much of it available to us, to have access to so much of it, because we end up too comfortable with too much convenience in ways that handicap us,
right?
And then we end up with too much to accumulate, that actually works against us instead of, working for us, which is the design.
And also, if you're a person with some sort of moral code, as you clearly are, and Jamie is, you get a sort of survivor's guilt when you have so much. I know that I do, and I live here, so I don't have an awful lot, but I always feel I'm very acutely aware of people that don't have anything at all. Like I'll be driving on the freeway and I'll see a guy broke down on the freeway, and the truck's overheated and it's a 30-year-old truck. And I was that guy for a long time. And I know what that feels like to just be squeaking by. But you said something interesting about you felt like it was failure in a way when you decided to go on this minimalistic thing. You felt like you had failed in some way, or did I misinterpret that?
No, not necessarily.
Not when you went to do this, but when you were kind of at the end of your acquisitive phase.
Well, the failure that I felt was just in every time I would try to go from this hoarding compulsion, to minimalism.
Oh, I see.
That's where the feeling of failure came in. And when I say hoarding, it wasn't like there were like dead cats under the rug, of course. It was just like, rooms full of shoes and clothes and bags.
Yeah, just the accumulation that so many people live with. I painted houses for many years, and sometimes I would go digging in people's garages looking for the last iteration of the house paint, right, so that I could match the color to it.
Right.
And oh my God, in the 10 years since they'd had the house painted before, those paint cans had become buried in so much stuff that it wasn't even an option to try to find them. Occasionally, you'd open a garage door and it would be actually packed solid to the front of the door,
Yeah.
and they weren't hoarders. we live in a society where we just naturally accumulate things. So what
Mhm.
sent you on that wilderness experience in the first place, that where your awakening took place?
God. It was the divine. It was one of the most aggressive interactions I've had with the divine. Usually when the divine has a message for me or some guidance, it comes like a suggestion, like a whisper, like a, hey, you might want to check this out. It's your thing, but like maybe go down that path. But there's been a couple of times in my life when it was aggressive and much louder, and where it felt like the universe was like maneuvering and conforming to like funnel me into this particular thing, because it is so pertinent to like my whole mission on this planet and like the curriculum that I need on this planet. And so I had no connection with the natural world. I hated hiking and camping. And I quit my job. I was working in the beauty industry, and I one day decided to quit my job and move somewhere I'd never been. And I ended up in Mesa, Arizona, and people are like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I'd never been there before. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a plan. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't find a job. And everywhere I went, though, I kept hearing about the Anasazi Foundation, which is a wilderness therapy program in Arizona. And it's the most primitive program of its kind. So again, you're carrying around everything on your back, not even a commercial pack. If it rains, you tie a poncho to a tree and like sleep under it. You're drinking out of creeks. You're drinking out of creeks and streams. You're not even on trails. If you find an animal trail, that's great. But like, you're not even on trails, just bushwhacking and things like that. And so, anyway, it just kept coming up everywhere I went. I was meeting people who were affiliated with this company, which is unusual because it's a small company. And so I was like, paying attention. I'm like, there's something about this, but nothing about it was appealing to me. Everything about it was horrifying to me. And then,
But you felt these were signs and omens.
Yeah. I mean, and that's how the divine communicates with me, is it's got to come at me from every direction for me to notice it. And it was like that. And then one day I was out looking for a job, and I passed by a building that said the Anasazi Foundation. I'm like, there's that place I keep hearing about. Why am I turning into the parking lot? Like, I'm serious, compelled from beyond myself. And then I go in and I'm talking to the field director, and everything he says to me is terrifying. I remember I think he was just trying to like weed me out, get rid of me. And he's like, there's nothing you can do to condition for it. You're going to feel like your arms are being ripped out of the sockets by carrying the weight. He's like, your bowels will never be the same. These are quotes. And I was like, that sounds terrible. Why am I filling out this application? Like, seriously, from one step to the next, everybody else was laughing at me. Like, who are you kidding, Tamra? You're not going to do this. And I was laughing at myself, like, why am I, and I was like, I'll just put one more toe in, I'll just go one step further. And then somehow
one more well manicured toe.
Exactly right.
Poking out of one of your 200 pairs of shoes.
And they were all laughing at me too. Like, the other people in the training group were people who were backpackers, and who were, more conditioned for this, for the primitive living and things like that. And the people at the company, and like, I found out later, they literally bet money that I wouldn't last a week. My first time out was 11 days. And the first 3 days of that was with my training group, and then a week with a bunch of teenage boys. And I literally thought I would die several times. I was convinced that my body could not do what everyone else seemed to be thinking bodies should do. And also, I was just sure that I was going to be drowned in a flash flood, run over by a boulder, eaten by a mountain lion, bit by a black widow or brown recluse, stung by a scorpion, bitten by a rattlesnake, struck by lightning.
All of the above.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, die of hypothermia. I was certain that all of those would happen to me the first night, or at some point in the week. And so it was the bravest thing. One of the bravest things. The second bravest thing I've ever done, for sure, was actually getting in that vehicle. And I still don't know where I got the nerve. And with the Anasazi Foundation, they go so deep into the backcountry that once you're in, like, they'll send a helicopter for you if you have a bone sticking out. But otherwise, like, the only way out is through. You have to get to the next point to get picked up, which means like you got to finish the shift. And had it been any other way, there's no way I would have totally opted out on like day 2 or 3, particularly once we started hiking with the group, carrying that weight. I was like literally thought I would die.
I wonder if any of my viewers would be able to guess what you do for a living now.
Oh,
you,
teaching primitive skills?
yes, and leading those sorts of expeditions. You've been doing that for a good long time.
Yeah, I guided for many, many years. I guided in Arizona, and then I guided for another wilderness therapy program based in Southern Utah called Wingate. And now I hire guides and therapists for Wingate. And then I also am a primitive living wilderness survival instructor. So
Yeah, and I've seen you do your thing several times. You're great at it. I've also
thank you.
followed you up more than one hiking trail, and actually, there were never any trails where we hiked, were there? It was it was always overland, climbing some damn misbegotten desert mountain. And the first time that we hiked, myself, you, Eugene, and a number of other people. Um, it was really hazardous going up, and we went across this ridge, and at some point I couldn't go any further because at that time I was still painting houses full time, and my knees were kind of shot, and my knees were just giving out on me going up. We were climbing up these like boulders, going up to the top of this ridge. You guys went a little further down, across, and I went back down, and then I had to watch you guys coming down a much more hazardous route. And at the time, Tamra was wearing these shoes that she made herself, and they were, like leather thongs attached to a piece of found rubber somewhere from a tire or whatever it was. These were like Huarache sandals that she whipped together one day, and she was wearing those on this hike, on this dangerous hike. And at some point, I hear this laughter echoing down the canyon, and it's Tamra. She's blown the shoe. She's broken her shoe. So now she's got to stop and remake her shoe, and she's giggling the whole time. And I'm having a heart attack down below. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to watch these new friends of mine tumble down to their deaths. But
Well, the only reason I was
somehow you
wearing
made it.
yeah, the only reason I was wearing shoes at all is because it was volcanic rock. Otherwise, it probably would have been barefoot. So
Yeah, that's a rough piece of ground we are working on there. So
yeah.
you've been now traveling around and living in your bus, and have you found that to be a kind experience? I know that sometimes you'll find yourself out among people who are doing the same thing, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
no explanation to be made. But
Mm-hmm.
but do you get any blowback from people, like maybe people old friends who think you've lost your mind completely, or just people that run across you in this converted school bus
Mm-hmm.
at times, maybe when you have to park somewhere in the suburbs or something? Do you get any curious inquiries about that?
I've gotten every kind of response imaginable. And it's been 6.5 years now. So, from the people who I know and who are in my world and from strangers, I prefer to be out on BLM land. I prefer to be out in the desert away from the city, but sometimes you got to go to the city, and sometimes you want to go to the city, but not for very long. And, you know, uh, I definitely had my door knocked on in the middle of the night by a lot of police officers, usually because somebody saw me and called the cops. Not always, sometimes they just see me. There's all different kinds of people who live in vehicles, and when people see me, their demeanor changes immediately. So I do have what some people might call cute white girl privilege, and so it's a different experience for me than it is probably for a lot of people. People see my rig and they're concerned and suspicious, but then when they see and interact with me, I'm nice, I'm smiley, I present as clean, and so it's not usually a problem after our first interaction, though. There have been a couple times where it is the weirdest thing, like where you cannot persuade them, like, I'm not a threat to you or anyone else. And it's so weird to be treated like a pariah, when I know of myself that I'm actually an upstanding citizen. And in fact, one of these occasions, that man was actually harassing a perfectly innocent person. He was a nuisance, but he thought I was a nuisance and a threat, but in fact he was. And so really ironic. It was in a nice neighborhood. I was meeting my friend for lunch because he worked at a school nearby, and this guy called the cops. The cops came and they said, "You're not actually doing anything wrong." And I'm like, "I know." And they're like, "Okay, well, if anyone messes with you, just tell them we said you're fine." And the guy was not satisfied, passed by on his bicycle several more times before he stopped and said, like, "How long are you going to be here? I'm concerned. This is a main thoroughfare for students." Like he was afraid of me being around children. And I'm like, "What about me?" Says I'm like federally cleared to work with kids, and I, like, in 3 different states, background checked to work with children. Like, so but mostly people are positive and curious, and a lot of, oh, I wish I could do that. A lot of people saying like, I wish I could do that, and I'm like, well, guess what? I used to wish I could do it, and then I did. So you can.
Well, there's a
In my
romance. There is a romance in this society about this, and of course, people like I cut you off there a little bit, but feel free to jump back to it. But Bob Wells, for what is sort of the guru of this thing in a way, and Bob does really persuade people toward this lifestyle in a lot of ways. I mean, even though he's very honest about the pooping in a bucket type stuff that goes along with this, and do you sometimes feel like maybe Bob ought to dial it back just a little bit? Because I've met a number of people who have gone out on this adventure and found that they weren't as suited for it, and that weren't ready for some of the hardships and the loneliness and some of the downside, which maybe you'd want to talk about some of the things that might make it not suitable for everybody.
Well, I'm guilty of the same thing, actually. Cammy and I were just talking about this the other day, how we just tell everyone all the time that they should do van life. But it is true that some people are, they're like, I'm going to be an Instagram hashtag, and they go out and they're like, this is not what I thought. I am pooping in a bucket. I am lonely, maybe, dirty or whatever. Being a backcountry guide prepared me really well to be comfortable. I already knew how adaptable I am as a human animal. And I had already I've already been 3 weeks in the backcountry without a shower or a bath. And, if you can live out of what's in a backpack, like you can definitely live out of what's in it. So I'm better prepared, but like sometimes I forget that, the perspective and the difference of frame of reference between me and, someone else where I'm like, just jump in, just do it. I think Cammy always says like, give anything a year before you decide. And I think that's really smart. For me, what might've taken me out in the first year was loneliness, actually. And then once I connected with community, with the nomadic community, and then also once I adapted to it, once I've shifted in terms of the alone time that I feel comfortable with and that I need, necessarily, because we just adapt to whatever our situation is if we give it that time. I was going to make another point about that.
I was thinking about that the other day as well, adapting, because there's certain things that I have just gotten used to just because they became inconveniences for me. And then I just adapt to them so quickly that a year later, I'm looking at them going, why did I never take care of this? And so sometimes adaptation works for us, and sometimes in a sense, it can work against us. And you'll meet people and they're living on the streets. Well, to them, that's become the new normal, and they've adapted. And of course, we're seeing all this adaptation to COVID, where people, I see people out, exercising out in the wide open spaces, 300 feet from the nearest person, and they got masks on their face. They're just adapted. So now people wear masks, and so, I mean, this is another one of those things about humans that you gotta keep your eye on a little bit and make sure you're adapting to something that's serving you, as opposed to something that might be making you unfit for human habitation.
We want to adapt intentionally.
I feel like I have adapted so well to living alone that I am probably unfit for cohabitation. So I probably should start, getting into some kind of living with somebody a day at a time, once in a while, just in case the right woman ever comes along. I might be able to somehow adapt to marriage.
You can adapt too well.
Are you going to?
Then you can adapt back.
Are you having any trouble adapting to being now sacredly yoked to another?
Yeah. It's again because both of us this is our first go at marriage, and so there's a lot of skills we've been honing, other skills, and I had being single down, I was so good at that, and now there's a whole different set of skills that we haven't really had the opportunity to hone in this degree of investment and commitment, so compromise and selflessness, and and seeing another person, that we've just had the luxury of just being pretty self-absorbed. So there's a heck of a learning curve with that, and then particularly because I do live such an extreme lifestyle, and I have such extreme I don't think they're extreme, but relative to convention, what most folks are doing and thinking, a lot of the ways that I think and operate look extreme, and he's more of a normal person than I am. Like, he's this side of average, but like,
he does have
anyway,
a compartment. He does actually
yes,
have a compartment. He has an address for those nosy mailmen to come.
Exactly.
In. Oh,
yeah.
You're in the city.
Yeah, he's downtown. So
yeah.
So here I am adapting back, but I don't want to adapt too much. And I am mindful of that. Like, that is a fear that I have, that I'm going to become too domesticated and get weak, and yeah. So,
well, that might be one of the ways that you do it, is that you end up with somebody who forces you into these adaptations that have something attached to them that is very desirable. In this case, he and the relationship with him, and then you just let the adaptation that you've proven you have the ability to do, you let it work on that, and you trust that you will also adapt to that.
Everything is a trade. Everything's a trade. Living van life is a trade, and getting married is a trade, but like, it's a good trade. It was I knew what I was doing. I mean, I didn't know what it would be like, but I knew I didn't know what it would be like,
Right,
so.
Right. Yeah, I was doing some math the other day in my mind and realized that I have lived alone longer than the span of time, combining the period that I lived with my parents, which was 18 years, and the span of time that I was married, and that was 15 years. So I have lived alone a greater cumulative number of years than all of the combined years where I lived with anybody else at all. And so it's probably no wonder that I'm slightly feral. But
well, I think it's good that you do stuff like this, because for me, the hardest part of, I think the combination of being single and nomadic was just kind of feeling like I wasn't making a contribution, and that my life didn't have a lot of purpose and meaning. And so I would have to intentionally incorporate ways to make sure that I was connecting with people, and that I was making a contribution, that I was helping, that I was part of something bigger than myself, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that your inner self, your sense of self, it doesn't take an awful lot of it for your inner self to go, okay, she's on the right track. She's not just going down the road of indulging the self-involvement that can happen when obviously during COVID, I was saying to friends quite often, I was even saying on my channel, I was saying, I'm concerned I'm losing my sense of perspective, because I'm not just bumping into people and brushing up against people in that way that we normally do. And though I've lived alone a long time, I've always made a habit of going out 2 or 3 times a week, chasing some opportunity to play music. And of course, you develop a whole community around that as well.
Right.
And
well,
it keeps you normal.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt like I definitely observed some major distortions developing and being exacerbated in my mind in that isolation. And the thing is, like, I didn't
during the COVID.
Correct.
The COVID interruption?
At the height of the isolation, and I didn't opt into the isolation. I was of a different philosophy and a different mind. However, because most of the world was either opting into the isolation or was having the isolation kind of imposed upon them, like as a byproduct, I was isolated. And so just my community and what I was accustomed to, and the connection that I was accustomed to, was greatly diminished and greatly reduced. And initially I was like, this doesn't even affect me, because like, I don't really participate in conventional society. I'm not like out retail shopping. I'm not going to the movies. I'm not going out to eat, like, I'm like, this won't really affect me. But the ways that I did connect with people were affected, and I got lonely. Like, I don't remember ever being lonely. And I would say, like, I wouldn't call it a break, but it really, it got kind of dire. It got kind of desperate, and it got kind of scary. And it was a great education for me that kind of reinforced a lot of the beliefs that I had, and illustrated just how much we are pack animals.
Yes.
And how much we are designed for connection, community, and like what the detrimental effects of not living according to that design are. And particularly, I could see that in whatever ways that we're disordered, they're exacerbated in isolation. Because when we're around people, particularly people who know us and are invested in us, that checks it somehow, so that we can't go too crazy. But even though I could intellectually and cognitively recognize, like, these are distorted thoughts, they didn't have that bound,
Right.
that you have.
And those sorts of thoughts correct themselves automatically by interaction with other people. And so, because none of us in a pack, in a tribe, in a village, the whole idea of a village seems to be based somehow psychologically on us not having the same sorts of minds. What good would that do? Why have 10 people? Sometimes I say 2 heads are better than one, but a step further, 2 types of heads are better than one.
Yeah.
And I know that politically, since I first met you, that you have always been very in favor of people of communicating across the divide. And it just seems more and more as I look at this situation that of course we're going to be different. And if as long as we are working toward a shared purpose, toward a shared civility, toward being able to do projects together, then you being different from me is actually an asset to me if I allow you to influence me. But that having said, saying that, us staying in proper balance with one another requires that we bounce off each other continually, more or less. So if you take all of these people and you lock them down and you say, there is this scary thing you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. Don't talk to anybody. But you can connect on Facebook. Oh, my God. And it's an election year. And look how bad this person is. And look how crazy this person is. It's almost like we've been through some sort of social experiment where what does it take to have them, to get them to go completely insane?
Yeah, definitely mental illness inducing and mental illness exacerbating, like all of those elements combined, for sure. And I think it really seems to me that there is some powerful entity or force that benefits from distraction, division, and fear, and that is threatened by collaborative conversations and balance.
Right.
And so that's what am I afraid of COVID? For sure I am. I'm afraid of every virus or illness. I have a natural, inborn natural fear of death and illness. But I think, we've been encouraged to subordinate every other concern or to ignore every other concern and to prioritize and to be myopic and to give all of our focus and attention to this one thing. And I think we can see the effects, all of the unintended consequences of that kind of myopic hyperfocus. And I'm afraid of a lot more than I'm afraid of a virus. I think that, equally destructive and contagious is this fear and hatred of each other.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.